Hello, everyone. This is Jeffrey Kerr. At the time of this recording, the Oscars have just taken place. Jack Mahanes is back to join me in recapping them. So, Jack, are you ready to begin?
Let's do this. A lot to dig into with this one.
Yeah, oh, yes. I guess first let's start with the categories we got wrong. Now, first, let me say that I ended up getting about 16 out of 23 correct. How about you?
That was the exact number I got correct as well. It was 16 out of 23. And our good friend Tara Khan also got 16 out of 23.
So I guess good company to be in.
Indeed.
Now, on to some of the categories we got wrong. First, Best Animated Feature Film, where you and I were both settled on The Wild Robots because of its overall precursor run, yet Flo pulled ahead with just its Golden Globe win anyway.
Yes, and I think that that was a sign that was just like last year, where the international block of the Academy carried that to victory, and what was likely a competitive race, just like last year. Like it was competitive between The Boy and the Heron and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and Boy and the Heron won, and in a close race, the international block, is likely what carried that to victory. So I wasn't shocked, although, when I saw on the podcast, when we did our final predictions, was I thought that Wallace and Gromit was going to cut into Flo's vote just enough for the Wild Robot to still win. So I knew that it was competitive, but I thought that the Robot would still eke it out, especially given that the Wild Robot got three nominations and Flo got two.
I mean, yes, but although as someone who has seen both Flo and Wallace and Gromit, well, they're both very different movies. Like Wallace and Gromit, well, those familiar with the franchise know exactly what to expect, whereas Flo is more unique in that, it was this low-budget independent animated film, all told with no dialogue. It only relies on sound and, well, its inventive animation style. So I guess that was enough to make it stand out from the crowd.
Yes, definitely.
Although, what was different between last year's race was that it was evenly matched between Spider-Verse and Boy and the Heron, plus the latter had Hayao Miyazaki, who's, obviously a filmmaking legend, and, there was, I guess, maybe feeling he was overdue for a second competitive Oscar, whereas the studio behind Flow didn't even have that going for it. And, of course, a number of people who talk about, oh, the Globes don't matter at all. Well, turns out they actually did this year because, well, Flo's surprise win at the Globes really got more people to catch up with it. And, and I've heard the people at Next Best Picture on their final predictions podcasts. Well, it might have been Matt Neglia mentioned, he's seeing a lot of enthusiasm for Flow from, filmmakers. So, I mean, I kind of goes back to what we learned from Coda Success 3 years ago. Forget about the stats, focus on momentum, specifically when more Academy members start to catch up with it.
Absolutely. That's absolutely the key is that you can't, predict something based on like, oh, it won this combo or it won, at this ceremony instead of this ceremony. You just kind of gotta look at where, what's gaining momentum as voting was happening. And I know that in some categories, like I know some people were predicting Timothy Chalamet to still win, but I think a lot of people forgot that SAG happened after Oscar voting had closed. So his win was kind of irrelevant in terms of how it affected the Oscar race.
Which may also apply to another category, which we'll get to. But
Oh,
anyway,
yeah.
now I guess now onto another category you and I both got wrong, best film editing. Now, because of the limited tea leaves we had for this category, I mean, the ACEDI Awards will finally be coming up within the next week or so, but we were both settled on Conclave because of its BAFTA win. Yet when Daryl Hannah announced Anora as the winner, that was when I knew Sean Baker was about to pull an Inarritu for Birdman by winning every single category he's nominated in.
Yes. And that was a big bellwether for something we're going to talk about in a little bit.
Yes, in fact, we should say Sean Baker just became the first person to win four Oscars for the same movie in the same night. I mean, that's not counting Bong Joon-ho 5 years ago, since while he did accept the award for Best International Feature Film for Parasite, well, the award is really given to the country of South Korea and not the filmmakers.
Correct.
Okay, now a category you and I both had different predictions for, which is Best Documentary Feature Film. When we last spoke, I was undecided on this category. I mean, Northernland had a lot of critical support. It was also very timely as it followed four activists in an act of resistance on the path to justice during the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Meanwhile, Porcelain War was the only contender that was nominated in this category at PGA. Not only that, but it also won the DGA for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Documentaries. And that combo probably helped 20 Days in Mariupol win last year. Therefore, I expected this to go to the doc relevant to the Russia-Ukraine war for the third year in a row, and, well, I got it wrong.
Yeah, the reason why I ended up going with No Other Land, I was comparing some notes with some friends before finalized predictions, and when we were talking about that one of the things that they mentioned was, is the Academy really going to give this category to a film about the Ukraine war for a third year in a row? Like at this point, it might seem a little bit overkill. And here's another film in the category that has to deal with a very timely subject. And so that just kind of felt more right to predict, in my opinion. And so I'm glad I did.
Well, yes, now I wish I did, but anyway, on to the next category, which you and I both got wrong. Best International Feature Film. When we last spoke, we both felt that Emilia Perez was gonna go the route of Green Book by overcoming all of its controversies to still win anyway. And well, it's a pleasant surprise. I'm still here one.
Oh, I was so glad with that one because it's definitely the better film than Amelia Perez. Now, the only reason I stuck with the Amelia Perez to win international feature film was because it had more support across the board. But I'm still here. This was a clear passion pick, and the Best Picture nomination, while it didn't help in another category for its chances, it's still I think that was what it needed in order to take down Amelia Perez in this category. And I'm glad it did. And I even saw um there was a video on Twitter of like a crowd in Brazil and they're showing the ceremony like a projector style on a building. And that's Penelope Cruz is going as like, here are the nominees. When they showed Amelia Perez, the crowd booed. And then I'm Still Here won, and everyone in the streets cheered. It was just excitement beyond belief if you watched that clip. So yeah, no, that was cool, and this was an upset that was well deserved.
Yes, and I'd say this reminded me of the 2021 Best Picture race where this bold Netflix film, The Power of the Dog, had the most nominations that year, and it was the front runner to win, yet this underdog with only three nominations overall comes from behind and takes it, especially after more voters caught up with it in the final stretch of voting.
Yes, Sony Pictures Classics absolutely did their job, and they got enough they got enough people in the Academy to prioritize seeing that movie, and that was what helped it win this category.
Yes. Now on to the final category we both got wrong. Okay. When we last spoke, I was undecided on who was winning Best Actress, but I ultimately settled on Demi Moore. I knew it was possible Mikey Madison could win, given that her BAFTA victory prevented Moore from sweeping the season. Plus, that group has forecasted upset wins over front runners with narratives before. Like last year, they went with Emma Stone in Poor Things, who then went on to prevent Lily Gladstone from becoming the very first Native American actress to win an Oscar for Killers of the Flower Moon. And in that scenario, Academy members went for the performance in the film they liked more. The former won four awards, while the latter won zero. Although after, Nora overperformed with wins, and I'm Still Here won international feature, and The Substance won makeup, but I guess it was leaving me in more suspense onto what was about to happen. But after stumbling last year, Josh Parham is back on track as the king of getting this category right as he smartly settled on Mikey Madison.
Jeffrey, I lost $50. Yeah, so that bet that I mentioned when we recorded our final
Yeah.
predictions episode, I immediately reached out to David and I said, David, congrats. I stand corrected. And I mean, he was way more confident in his prediction than I was, and I think that that says a lot. How do I feel about this? I do think at the very least, Mikey Madison was very worthy of the win. This is not an undeserving win. She's very, no, not just very good. She's great in the film. I will say I am a little bit sad that Demi Moore didn't win, and not for any narrative. I just saw that that was just such a bold, audacious performance that I just did not expect her to give. When Anora won film editing, that was a big like, oh, okay. I don't want to jump the gun, but this might be heading in that direction. And then now I will say if the substance had lost makeup to say Wicked, that would have been like, oh, that's a very bad sign for Demi Moore. And then I'm Still Here won international film, and you had to think like, what if Fernando Torres ends up defying all the stats and pulling it off? But I will say when we got to Emma Stone about to open the envelope, I was kind of anticipating that she was going to say Mikey Madison at that point because the only thing that Honora had lost up to that point, and then the only thing that lost last night was supporting actor for Yor Borisov. And my gosh, Mikey Madison, first major role, 25 years old, almost 26, wins a lead acting Oscar. That's impressive. That is impressive. And with only BAFTA. But yes, I think how she won it is very, very easy. Honora had a massive surge by the time voting was happening because PGA, DGA, WGA, her BAFTA win. It was, to quote Champ in Anchorman, it was a real whammy. It really was. And so and yes, to me, one SAG, but that happened after voting. Um, and I do think at the end of the day, I don't think her Razzie past is what hurt her because there's been a lot of goodwill from her amongst her peers over the years. I think what really did her in was the body horror aspect of it all. The last half an hour of the substance I think was a bridge too far for voters because they've embraced out of the box films, especially in this category in recent years with Michelle Yeoh and Emma Stone. But and even some of the content in The Whale was definitely could be a little bit off-putting for some people. That I think those last 30 minutes of substance were a bridge too far. And I think that that is the reason, while she probably came very close, given everything she had won the season, I think that that's why she lost.
Yeah, different from the Sylvester Stallone and Creed situation.
Oh, totally different. Totally different. But then again, like, some people would counter my argument and say like maybe they don't think Demi lost, they think Mikey won. That like, Demi didn't win because of anything she did. Mikey won because she was in the best it was a powerhouse performance in the film that was going to win Best Picture. And she won BAFTA as voting was happening. So I would say Mikey Madison probably my third or fourth favorite in the lead actress lineup. But it's still a win that I'm more than okay with. But I'm sad that I have to give someone $50 because I accepted a bet. But a deal's a deal. So yeah, David said he's like, hey, let me get, my Venmo account, up and running and I'll request the $50.
Yeah, and that was how Josh Palm correctly forecasted Olivia Colman beating Glenn Close in 2018 and Frances McDormand winning a open-ended Best Actress race in 2020, why he should have settled on Emma Stone last year, especially after getting back on track this year. I'm officially never ignoring the stat of the nominee whose film was the stronger contender prevails in a race ever again.
Yes, and I told my good friend Tara Khan when we were comparing final notes the night before the Oscars. I mentioned him because he was going for Fernando Torres, and the thing I mentioned to him was that when upsets happen, they happen when the contender who wins is in the stronger film. And I'm Still Here only had those three nominations for international film, lead actress, and best picture. whereas The Substance had director, original screenplay, and nominations and the makeup win. But Honora had an additional acting nomination. Honora had an editing nomination that also went on to win. So, yes, the theory of like the upset, the frontrunner was upset by the film, by the contender in the stronger film, proved to be true.
Well, yes. In fact, I saw Dan Bayer of Next Best Picture tweet last night, had Kieran Culkin not been committing category fraud by going supporting for real paying, could Yor Borisov have won there, thus marking a clean sweep for Honora, which I think is definitely possible.
I think he was the default runner-up. I
Mhm.
really think he was because, I mean, yes, maybe Edward Norton got some votes from his friends who may think he's due for an Oscar. Guy Pearce, you know, long working actor in the industry, probably got some votes, but not enough. And then Jeremy Strong, is an Emmy winner, so he's liked by his fellow actors. But so yeah, they all probably got, some moderate amount of support. But of course, like no one was being Kieran Culkin, and he won everything this season. And even from like the Critics Awards and from, it just he was labeled the front runner from the moment that movie premiered, and that just never really wavered. Oh, and my freshman year roommate Ben, I was talking to him Sunday, and we were just discussing Oscar predictions. And he said, "Jack, do you know why Kieran Culkin, has been steamrolling all season? Do you know the real reason why?" And I said, "Why? It's because he doesn't care." Like Hollywood hates it when like people are like desperately want their Oscar. He's been so laid back about the whole thing and just let it all come his way. And that really helped him this season. But anyway,
And
I went off on a tangent, but yes, I do think, after Honora won everything else, I think that Borisov was the default runner-up.
okay, and I should add, like mother, like daughter, 26 years after Fernanda Montenegro lost the Best Actress Oscar for her performance in a Walter Salles film to a young ingenue in the Best Picture winner, Fernanda Torres just experienced it herself, and Glenn Close probably has similar thoughts to when Gwyneth Paltrow beats Montenegro in 1998. It doesn't make sense.
I will point out one thing. I don't know if you caught this, but when Mikey Madison was making her way to the stage, Laura Dern was clapping, but she did not look that enthusiastic. If you look at her reaction when Adrian Brody won, and you compare it to when Mikey Madison won, she didn't look that thrilled, to be honest. I was kind of thinking she was Team Torres.
I guess now onto the show itself. What were your thoughts on the telecast as a whole?
In terms of the telecast as a whole, I think it was a good show. Is this the best Oscars of my lifetime? No, but was it the worst? Also no. I really thought that Conan did a pretty good job. I think it was kind of a breath of fresh air because I was kind of getting burnt on Jimmy Kimmel, to be honest. Not that I don't like Jimmy Kimmel. It just felt like, Jimmy never really did anything interesting after doing it a couple times. It just felt like he it was cool when he did it the first couple times, and then the next couple times just what he did was very forgettable, except for, the Donald Trump joke that he made last year, which was
Oh, yeah.
pretty funny. But yeah, I think Conan did a good job. I thought that it was very weird that like they had the acting winners present the category they won the year before instead of the old tradition of the Oscar of like presenting the opposite gender. And someone pointed this out, and this was it's like, oh wow, when you put it that way, Emma Stone has won two Best Actress Oscars, and she's never presented Best Actor.
Right, because I guess the actor she first won, she presented Best Director instead.
Yes, and then she presented Best Actress last night. I will say, the my favorite part of last night, and this was a big surprise. This was not someone who was on the list to be presenting, but I was so excited when Mick Jagger came out to present original song.
I had a feeling you were about to say that.
Yeah, because Mick Jagger is the man who made me want to become a singer. When I was 9, I saw the Rolling Stones for the very first time. Life was never the same after that. And so yeah, when he came out, I was like, oh my God, it's Mick. And yeah, no, I thought that was cool. I thought it was cool that Quentin Tarantino was a surprise presenter, even though he was presenting a category that he is infamously never won. He has two screenplay Oscars, but he's never won for directing. But yeah, in terms of the show, I think that it flowed fairly well. The opening with Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande was pitch perfect. Like I even got goosebumps. Their dynamic was just so incredible.
Well, first of all, let me say that the opening montage was a touching tribute to the City of Angels following, the recent wildfires from a couple months ago. And of course, to have that followed up with, a medley of songs from, Wizard of Oz related properties by both Erivo and Grande, with Grande performing Over the Rainbow from the 1939 classic to Erivo performing Home from the Wiz, then both going into Defying Gravity. That was so incredible.
Oh, it was absolutely incredible. Yeah, and they hit it out of the park. I also I thought the James Bond tribute was pretty good. I liked it. It was all right. I thought that some of the presenting pairings were pretty cool. Like one that I really enjoyed was Andrew Garfield and Goldie Hawn. I really thought their dynamic was really cool. And very sweet, I should say. Scarlett Johansson and June Squibb presenting together was a really good pairing. I thought it was interesting how they did the Fab Five, but for different categories.
Yeah, yeah.
Cinematography, costume design. It was
Yeah.
it was different, but I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, we should add that. Okay, they announced they were doing the Fab Five early on. Then, after the Carlos Sofia Gascon controversy came out, Burbs was "Oh, we're not doing. Oh, we were never playing on the acting categories." Even though some have wondered if, well, they are actually making change of plans, so no one would have to really go about honoring her. Or, well, I mean, we'll probably never know.
We'll probably never know, but speaking of which, that kind of transitions a little bit into the next thing I was going to bring up. The clips. Why did only the leads get the clips? Why did not the supporting characters? Why not the supporting nominees? Because I thought when it was clear how they were going about the presentation, that when Robert Downey Jr. went through it, I thought he was just doing a shtick at first, and it was very entertaining. Robert Downey Jr. is a very charismatic, person on the stage. And so, but then like when he went to the envelope, I was like, wait, we're not getting the clips? Like, like I thought this was just like, hey, I'm being Robert Downey Jr. I'm just, hey, let me just say one thing about you before we roll the clips. And then I thought, okay, I guess this is how they're gonna do it. And then, supporting actress, Devon Joy Randolph honored each of the five nominees herself. But then when we got to lead actor and they showed the clips, I'm like, wait, the leads are getting clips, but the supporting nominees aren't getting clips. That's awful. That's insulting. And I did not like that at all.
Yeah,
But also, maybe you could say that this is why I decided not to do like I guess they were maybe sparing Emma Stone for having to say nice things about Carlos Vegas.
yeah, probably. Okay, now what was interesting about the Bond tribute is that for the second time in Oscar history, Halle Berry introduced a James Bond tribute on the telecast. The last time was for the franchise's 50th anniversary in 2013, and this time it was in celebration of producers Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson receiving honorary Oscars back in the fall, which, is also interesting timely, given that, well, Amazon MGM has just gained full control of the franchise from them.
Absolutely. And I gotta say, she looked fantastic. I loved that dress, and I thought that her hair especially looked great. And speaking of Halle Berry, I don't know if you caught this. On the red
I,
carpet,
I did.
you did? Yeah, on the red carpet, she did a, playful revenge kiss. And she's like, I had to do this.
On
But
Adrian
but it but it
Brody.
but it goes to show because I think people did wonder over the years that like were there like actual hard feelings between, Hallie and Adrian, given that, Adrian, kissed her without her consent on when he won his Oscar for The Pianist. But you can see that like, they're long past it and that they're friends.
Well, yeah, especially after she congratulated him on his Golden Globe win back in January on Instagram.
Yes, and then when he won Critics' Choice, on Instagram, she said, "I smell an Oscar in your future."
Now back to the Bond tributes. Now, the performance section of it was interesting to say the least, as it started with some sort of stylized ballet by Mark Ward's Qualley to, the iconic theme music, then came a medley of different Bond songs.
Yeah, no, and I thought that the medley was perfect, and I think it kind of captured sort of like the most important eras of the James Bond franchise. Like you had the older ones, like the ones that Shirley Bassey sang, and then you had the one, Skyfall was featured, which is probably the best Bond song of the Daniel Craig era. Yeah, no, I like that a lot.
And the Fab Five presentation formats used in craft categories this time was, interesting to watch play out. Actors from each of the nominated films for costume design and cinematography singing their praises of the nominees from their respective films. I thought it was a nice touch. And, we often complain about, oh, no, don't have a category presented by an actor who happens to be in one of the nominated films. But, in this one, hey, if you are going to do it this way.
Yes, yes, yes. I think that it was a good way to do it. I thought that Bowen Yang, like actually showing up on stage in the costume that he wore in Wicked, I thought, and then making a big deal of it about it, I thought that that was hilarious.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, thankfully, he got to present it to the costume designer Paul Tazwell, who's now the very first African American man to win a costume design Oscar. So congrats to him.
And that standing ovation was really, really nice to see.
Okay, this year they infamously decided not to have any of the original song nominees perform at all, but we did at least get a clip montage with voiceovers from the nominee songwriters, which I thought was pretty neat.
I thought that was neat too. And it wasn't just like, clip like, brief seconds like where they just name the nominees and you kind of hear like a little bit like hear it a little bit in the background. This was just like actually like honored each nominee without, doing the performances. Although I do wonder, do you think that Mick looked a little bit unenthusiastic about reading Al Mal's name? I mean, I don't know if he's ever seen Amelia Perez or anything, but I mean, I think if I'm pretty sure he's friends with Elton John because Elton John actually played on the last Rolling Stones record, despite him having a past feud with Keith Richards.
Well, sort of reminds me of how unenthusiastic Samuel L. Jackson and Brie Larson looked when they announced Green Book as the best original screenplay winner.
And especially when compared to Black Klansman winning the Adapted Screenplay Award that followed.
Yeah, and how enthusiastic Spike Lee was to get it from Sam.
Yes.
I should also add, the packages of the Best Picture nominees featuring voiceovers from the cast and crew, I thought was a nice touch.
Oh yes, I loved that personally because it really just kind of gives you it really just kind of gave like the backstory about like like the messages that all those films were trying to convey. I mean, oh, I will say I did kind of notice. I don't know if you caught this as well. It kind of feels like the commercial cut back to the Oscars too late, like at the tail end of Amelia Perez's presentation. Like, was that? Did you catch that, or was that just me?
I might have to rewatch it because I don't think I did.
Okay, because if that was the case, then that feels slightly intentional.
No, I haven't gotten around to giving my comments on Conan O'Brien's job overall, which I thought was pretty good. I mean, his opening parody of The Substance was genius.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, and his opening monologue was clever, and his I Won't Waste Time song was also fun.
Absolutely. Oh, yes.
And also, the In Memoriam segment was this year was definitely a step up from last year's, especially with, Morgan Freeman introducing it with a touching tribute to the recently deceased Gene Hackman was also nice.
Oh, that was very, very touching. And you could tell that Morgan was really, really choked up, talking about Gene and doing that tribute to him. Yeah, no, that was really emotional.
Yes, and what did you think of the tributes to the recently deceased Quincy Jones, who was announced to get an honorary Oscar, but ended up getting it posthumously because he died after the announcement?
I thought that the tribute was cool. I think it was appropriate having both Whoopi and Oprah doing it. Especially given that their first ever feature film was both The Color Purple,
Mhm.
and Quincy Jones was a producer on the movie, and so yeah, no, I think that the tribute was good. I think that it was right to have both Whoopi. It was appropriate to have both Whoopi and Oprah, lead the tribute, and I thought that was nice. I didn't think it was just as impactful as Morgan Freeman talking about Gene Hackman, but it was a good tribute.
Anything else you want to add?
Like I'm not as even though there's some very deserving winners, of course. As a whole, I'm not as excited as I was last year. Like I just think last year gave us some really exciting winners, like Oppenheimer, Winning Picture, Cillian Murphy, Robert Downey Jr., Christopher Nolan winning their Oscars. Was like really really exciting. I was like some of the ones that I was like really really glad about. Adrian Brody and very deserving. I narrowly preferred him over Timothy Chalamet. But at the same time, maybe I just wasn't as enthusiastic, given that he already has one. And so, when you're seeing someone getting their second Oscar, it's maybe not as exciting as when you see someone getting their first. Doesn't mean that they're not deserving or that they shouldn't have won, but that's just kind of an observation of, how I feel sometimes about someone getting another Oscar. Regardless of my criticism of the film, I actually was very, very happy to see Zoe Saldana win because I think she's a very underrated actress in general. And I really, in Avatar, as Gamora in the MCU, like I just think she's an underrated actress. And so to see her now as an Oscar winner, and especially when she has Avatar 3 coming out this Christmas, I think that, that's really, really cool. That was cool to see. And her speech was excellent.
Oh yes, that she managed to come out of the Amelia Perez controversies completely unscathed.
100%.
Yes, and speaking of which, what's interesting is that all four acting awards this year went to performances in essentially leading roles, which, okay, now category fraud hasn't usually bothered me in the past, and for the most part still doesn't, but I must admit, it's kind of starting to get on my nerves.
It is kind of, they're pushing it because some of the people in the past who have won, alleged, people who people consider leads, going supporting, like someone like Viola Davis, like she really the only reason why, she was argued to be a co-lead is because she kind of has the final part of that movie to herself.
Yeah, and fences.
In Fences, yes. And Lisa Vikander is the secondary character in The Danish Girl to Eddie Redmayne. Those can be excused. Zoe Saldana really is kind of the lead for a lot of, Amelia Perez. And then Kieran Culkin is on screen just as much as Jesse Eisenberg. So it's pushing it in terms of, getting away with, being, a supporting character.
Yes, and as the Academy is obviously going to be introducing a new award next year for Best Casting, well, if you ask me, they should also introduce rules regarding category placements to prevent any further category frauds from happening ever again, so we could have more nominees and winners in the supporting categories who are genuinely supporting.
Sure, but I think in some cases it's debatable. Not like Zoe Saldana, who, really kind of carries like the first part of the movie, and then not Kieran Culkin, who really is, side by side with Jesse Eisenberg almost the entire time. So not them, but like someone like Mahershala Ali, for example,
In
in my
Green
opinion,
Book.
in Green Book, in my opinion. Like we never see the story from Mahershala's perspective until the scene when he's alone in his residence before he goes over to Tony Vallelonga's apartment for Christmas. Aside from that, like it's we never see the movie from his perspective. It's all entirely from Viggo Mortensen's perspective. So I know some people think that's category fraud, but I think that that's one of the ones where you can potentially justify him going supporting.
Yeah, I guess you could say the same thing about Catherine Zeta-Jones in Chicago, although, in the movie, well, it's told more from Renee Zellweger's perspective. Well, I mean, I haven't seen the stage version of Chicago, but I've heard that both those roles are equal, especially since Velma Kelly, Catherine's character, has always contended as lead at the Tonys.
Yes, and yeah, and they both compete against each other and lead at the Golden Globes.
I guess that's all I got. So that just about does it for our recap of this year's Oscars. Thanks again for joining me tonight, Jack. This was
Oh,
great.
definitely was great. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, so we'll be back in a few months to discuss the Emmys.